About motivation, chapter 7. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay, chapter 7. Time to think about success, motivation. Motivation typically involves intention to reach a desired goal. The idea of intending to reach a goal or directing one's behavior toward a desired outcome can be found in most current theories of motivation. Some researchers focus on what is involved in directing and sustaining behaviors. Others are more concerned with why we are motivated toward goals, focusing on what fuels our or energizes our desire for certain outcomes. Teachers typically focus on motivation to learn and succeed in school. Motivation to learn is defined as the intention of acquiring the knowledge or skills that learning activities are designed to develop. Studies based on teacher perception find that motivation to learn is exemplified by students who can find value, meaning, and reward in learning. Students who demonstrate a strong motivation to learn appear to have a long-term commitment to the quality of learning process. While it seems obvious to say that students learn because they are motivated, uncovering the reasons we choose, work toward, and reach certain academic outcomes is complicated. Just like that figure that he's looking at. Motivation is a complicated topic and integrates many aspects of our lives. The reasons we learn is very complicated. Society provides many rewards for academically successful students, scholarships, good jobs, higher levels of financial compensation, etc. Grades also provide students with ongoing incentives for academic success. Human learning is complex, that a whole host of theories have been developed. Human learning is so complex that a whole host of theories have been developed to address our motivation to learn and succeed. A basic concept in the study of motivation to learn involves the question of whether learning is determined by internal or external factors. For example, you studied hard for your last test in biology. If you studied because you were interested in the material, your behavior was motivated by an internal factor, your interest. Your study was intrinsically motivated or initiated and directed by internal processes. People engage in intrinsically motivated behaviors without the necessity of external rewards. The activity is inherently interesting or enjoyable. Some behavior is motivated by factors outside of the individual. Extrinsically motivated behavior involves actions that produce an externally mediated outcome. If, for example, you studied for your test because you wanted a good grade, external factors motivated your behavior. You engaged in studying because getting an A is rewarding. According to the perspective that organisms behave as a function of consequences, all behavior is motivated by external factors in the form of reinforcement and punishment. Since not all classroom activities are inherently interesting, extrinsic reinforcement is frequently used in the classroom. A considerable body of research demonstrating how external rewards increase the frequency of behavior supports the use of extrinsic motivation in education. Consider, for example, the common practice of using performance-based grading systems as extrinsic motivators. Rewarding a student who has studied hard with a good grade is positively reinforcing the studying behavior. What if the student studies hard and does not earn a good grade? In this case, the consequence for studying is punishing to the student. According to operant theory, this would lead to a decrease in future studying behavior. As you can see, providing extrinsic reinforcement is complicated, leading to both desirable and problematic outcomes. And one of the problems with doing all of these things, with doing all of these motivational, especially extrinsic motivation, is that you never know what, whether you're reinforcing good or bad behavior. If we want a student to maintain studying behavior, good grades need to reliably follow studying. What would happen if we removed grading systems completely for all students? Some schools are putting that philosophy to the test. Big picture schools are high schools based on a different educational philosophy. These schools diverge from traditional instructional models. And the other thing that you need to think about here as we talk about big picture schools is that big picture schools are private schools. Big picture schools are never public schools. This isn't something that has happened in the private sector. So when we talk about motivation and we talk about success in the big picture schools, one of the things that you need to remember is they're very selective, and they select students who are going to be successful anyway, and that's part of the problem with this type of research. Students do not attend traditional classes. We're talking about big picture schools here. Students do not attend traditional classes or take typical tests. Instead, students are encouraged to engage in real world problems. Students work closely with a mentor, 15 students to one mentor. Therefore, throughout their entire high school career, they develop extensive portfolios of their work, learning, and experiences. They give oral presentations on their experiences. Their focus is on developing the motivation skills and personal qualities to achieve success in higher education. The hope is that these non-traditional schools will be better able to develop mindful learners. And of course, like I said before, these are not public schools, these are private schools. And they're very selective as to who becomes their students. There's another problem here. What was the other problem? Oh, homeschooling. This is one of the ways that homeschooling is done as well. While extrinsic reinforcement can be an effective tool in the classroom, there are other motivational factors impacting student success. There seems to be much controversy today regarding the positive and negative effects of extrinsic reinforcement on the motivation to learn. Some researchers assert that if behaviors in which we engage because we naturally enjoy them are suddenly extrinsically reinforced, we may become dependent on the extrinsic reinforcer. Extrinsic reinforcement may undermine intrinsic motivation. The relation between extrinsic and intrinsic reinforcement is complicated. Some research shows that extrinsic motivation may undermine intrinsic motivation to learn, while other research shows extrinsic motivation may enhance it. For example, a greater sense of autonomy appears protective against some of the potential negative effects of rewards on intrinsic motivation. Another aspect of motivation theory is whether behavior is determined by an individual's inherent traits or by the situations in which they find themselves. Some theorists argue that people possess motivational traits which cause them to behave in similar ways, regardless of the situation. Traits are relatively enduring characteristics of the individual. In this context, we are referring to psychological traits, but the idea is consistent with physical traits like having green eyes. For example, researchers have conducted studies on individual differences in need for achievement, indicating that some individuals exhibit a consistent need to achieve over time and across situations. State theories show how our motivation depends on the situation. Probably the most extreme example of this perspective comes from behavioral theory, where all behavior is determined by environmental consequences. The environment in which you live determines everything you do. Behavioral theorists do not rely on any internal constructs like traits or to explain behavior. Your behavior is entirely state dependent on environmental circumstances. If a student studies for a test, then they are being rewarded for that behavior. Behaviorists would not say that the student studies because they have a general trait characterized by consistent study behavior. Contemporary motivational research on learning continues to focus on the importance of different reinforcers as well as on other environmental variables such as the context in which people learn. Researchers continue to disagree about whether behavior results from individual characteristics, trait theory, or qualities of the situation, state theory. Each of these lines of research has contributed to our understanding of the motivation to learn, and it may be that the state, trait, dimension in motivation is more of a continuum than a dichotomy. Trait and state influences on behavior likely interact to produce behavior. Further, cognitive researchers believe this interaction between the person and the situation is mediated by our thoughts, expectations, and problem-solving ability. What motivates behavior is studied using a variety of psychological constructs. Depending on the theoretical perspective, different aspects of the individual and the environment are highlighted to explain behavior. Behavioral scientists are interested in the observable behavior, emphasizing the effects of prior events and behavioral consequences. The behaviorist typically does not attribute causes of behavior to internal constructs such as motivation. Behavioral theorists view internal events or constructs as personally relevant, but not necessary to explain the cause of behavior. We all have a sense that our mental lives are vibrant and important to our daily lives, but behaviorists believe these events fail to contribute to an understanding of why we behave as we do. Understanding of behavior comes from a close examination of the individual's environment. According to the behaviorist, behavior is supported by certain environmental factors, and behavior modification occurs by systematic alteration of these factors. Behaviorists abandon introspective analysis of feelings and thoughts because they felt such constructs were ambiguous and ill-defined and did not contribute to an understanding of the causes of behavior. The hallmark of their perspective is that behavior can be successfully managed by manipulation of appropriate environmental events. The behaviorist sees the determinants of behavior as residing in the individual's environment. Of primary importance are the consequences that follow behavior, such as reinforcements and punishments. Reinforcements are positive environmental events following a behavior of interest, resulting in an increase in the frequency of behavior. Punishments are similar but involve aversive situations that result in a decrease in the frequency of behavior. Behavioral theory holds that consequences such as reinforcements and punishments shape the expression of behavior, thus providing an explanation for why we act. Another perspective on human motivation comes from a field of study historically called humanistic theory, and of course I was trained as a humanist back in the 1970s. Humanistic theory rose to prominence during the 1960s, in part as a reaction to the overly mechanistic behavioral approach. Consistent with the social and cultural movement at the time, humanistic theorists emphasized the unique needs and wants of every individual. They sought to move away from the focus on managing behavior by manipulating environmental variables, choosing instead to look inward toward more personal explanations for why we act. The movement was relatively short-lived and quickly eclipsed by yet another movement during the 1970s, the cognitive theory. Cognitive theory, in conjunction with a steady interest in behavioral theory dominated psychology until recently. Currently, a resurgence of interest in personal variables such as fulfillment and optimal growth has seen a return to some of the basic tenets of humanistic theory, a movement known as positive psychology. And of course, as far as I was concerned, I found cognitive psychology at the time in the 1970s. One of the things you have to remember is that computers were not very sophisticated. They weren't nearly as sophisticated as they are today. And part of the cognitive theory that this guy is touting is that the human brain works like a computer. Well, at the time, computers didn't even have transistors, okay? So they were huge, they were massive, and people had to program them. And of course, there were no personal computers. So, to say that the cognitive theory took over in the 1970s is not really true. It didn't take over uh, until at least the 1990s because computers were too slow and people were arguing with them too much. Well, this doesn't mean anything. We were still doing all of our research, uh, looking up library books and whatnot. So no, the cognitive approach that this guy is touting uh, wasn't that strong. Okay, especially in education. And of course, I was working in education at the time, and a lot of times the psychology department was housed in the education department. Uh, so that one discipline, of course, fed off the other. And I can tell you that the cognitive approach didn't become more prevalent until at least the 1990s. So this is a little and the other thing that we need to remember is that we're not just talking about research and we're not just talking about education. We're also talking about counseling. Um, Cognitive behavioral therapy that we use that is very prevalent today was not very strong until the 1990s. Before that, of course, we were using Rogerian therapy, Egan's model, that kind of stuff. Um, so when we talk about the cognitive approach really didn't hit its stride until the 1990s. Okay, cognitive behavioral therapy was out there. It was supported by Beck. It was also supported by Ellis, and at the time, Ellis had his rational emotive therapy. Now it's called rational emotive behavioral therapy, and until they put the behavioral behind it, the rational emotive therapy was functional, but it wasn't accepted by the cognitive psychologists. So there was this argument going on between Ellis and Beck when they were still alive, of course. And Beck kind of copied Ellis. Um, Beck was a lot more directive. His type of therapy was a lot more directive than Beck was, but they used the same premise. And the premise was actually written by Ellis and not by Beck. This gets real complicated, and it has to do with politics. Ellis was doing things he shouldn't have done. He was having sex with his clients, and for that reason, of course, nobody wanted to have anything to do with Ellis's theories. But of course, Beck kind of snatched them. He kind of stole them. Anyway, this has to do with the politics of psychology, and of course, the cognitive theorists, of course, would say, "Oh no, cognitive psychology took over in the 1970s." No, not really. Uh, Take it from somebody that was watching and that was studying psychology at the time. It didn't really take off until the 1990s. So we're talking about humanism here, and the other thing this is really kind of interesting because why in the world does he mention Abraham Maslow? Carl Rogers was the one that developed the humanistic theory. Um, Maslow wasn't even considered a humanist at the time, but that's okay. Let's go ahead with what Swartwood is saying. Abraham Maslow is one of the most prominent researchers in the humanistic movement. Although his initial training was in behavioral theory, and the other thing that you need to understand is the reason that humanism was so powerful that it was followed by so many people was because it wasn't really arguing with behaviorism as much as it was arguing with psychoanalysis. Behaviorism was thought to be a trick. So the behavioral movement uh, wasn't that strong actually. Um, in the United States. It was only being used to change people's behavior. But then people would want to go to therapists to find out why in the world they did what they did. And that kind of worked because you changed their behavior and then you'd find out why. You go into therapy and find out why, and that's what came out of the that's what came out of the humanist movement. They were asking you about your feelings. So, well, let's go ahead and talk about Maslow. Um, he did do research. He wasn't a therapist, by the way. Maslow was a theorist, and he was also a researcher, but he didn't do any therapy. This is really kind of interesting because they're trying to separate the two, and it's really impossible because the psychological theory that is dominant is the one that supports therapy, not the one that supports education. Although his initial training was in behavioral theory, actually it wasn't. It was in psychoanalysis. He gradually moved toward the investigation of internal factors like individual needs and personal growth. In 1954, theory maintained that what motivated people was a desire to satisfy individual needs. The other thing that you need to remember about cognitive therapy or theories is that cognitive theories really couldn't take hold until we had mechanisms to measure things. The mechanisms we're talking about are PET scans and MRIs and CAT scans. And until we could actually visualize what was going on in the brain, the cognitive theory was just that. It was just theory. And once, of course, we were able to look into the brain and find out what was actually going on in there, that's when the cognitive theory took off, and that was in the 1990s. Before that, the only thing that we could do was an EEG and an X-ray. We could X-ray the brain, but we couldn't tell what was going on until PET scans, MRIs, functional MRIs, and whatnot. His 1954 theory maintained that what motivated people was a desire to satisfy individual needs. The theory met with criticism at the time, but ultimately gained widespread acclaim during the social and civil rights movement in the 1960s. Maslow's work emphasized how the typical individual attempts to achieve optimal mental health. This was a radical departure from other theories of psychology, primarily focusing on mental illness and atypical behaviors. So Maslow was really the first individual to focus on normality. What had been going on before was they were looking for mental illness and atypical behaviors. Why would they do that? Because these are the individuals that are not non-functional in society. So, of course, they were trying to bring them back into society. The central premise in Maslow's theory is that people spend their lives striving to satisfy an ever-changing series of needs. These motivational needs can be represented graphically as a pyramid and are referred to as the hierarchy of needs. And of course, we've gone through this over and over and over again. Physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness and love needs, esteem needs, cognitive needs, aesthetic needs, and finally, eventually, self-actualization. Maslow's theory holds that from the time we are born, we have a perception that we are deficient in something and therefore strive to acquire it. We initially attempt to satisfy our basic physiological needs like eating. Young children use their limited repertoire of skills, such as crying, to elicit appropriate care from others. This need lessens over time as individuals become adept at gaining food and shelter. We worry less about our physiological needs as we become more competent in meeting these needs. Next, our focus shifts to another perceived deficit, the need for safety, represented as a shift up the pyramid to the next level. As with our physiological needs, we initially spend considerable time and energy meeting our need for safety, moving on to other needs as we learn to satisfy the current need. We continue in this way, moving up the hierarchy of needs, trying to meet hierarchy of needs, trying to meet needs we perceive that are in deficit. Uh, okay, so where did Maslow get these ideas? It came out of the concentration camps of World War II. Maslow was working with Jewish refugees that were coming into the United States. Now, at the time, the only refugees that were able to come into the United States were intellectuals. And the reason they were allowing intellectuals into the United States was because they could further the research that was taking place. And this was things like the atomic bomb. Mathematicians were allowed in, musicians were allowed in. But the common everyday street vendor, Jewish street vendor, they weren't able to come into the United States. So, and Maslow was part of the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement was a Jewish movement in the 1930s and 1940s to establish a homeland in Palestine, what the area that is now Israel. And of course, all the troubles that are going on in the Middle East right now harken back to the 1930s and 1940s when there was no Israel, and when that part of the world was primarily controlled by the Arab states, primarily Jordan. Transjordan is what they called it. Actually, it was controlled by the British, who took over after World War One, and they found that it was a powder keg because they had these two groups of individuals that really didn't like each other at all, and here they were trying to take over this chunk of territory, which would eventually become Israel. At the time, it was referred to as Palestine, and the Zionist movement was the idea that the Jewish people that had lost their homeland, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, these individuals had wandered into Europe and into Spain. So you had the Ashkenazi Jews who were in Eastern Europe, and you had the Sephardic Jews that were in Spain. And these individuals needed to come back to Palestine. They needed to establish a Jewish state. And that was what the Zionist movement was all about. Well, Abraham Maslow was part of that, the whole thing. And he wasn't very old. He's just a high school child. And he was a college individual. He was a high school student in the 1930s. In the 1940s, he was a college student. And he was actually helping to smuggle people into Palestine, because at the time it was difficult for Jewish people to get a visa to be able to live there. So they were smuggling people in, and he was part of that movement. And he was also helping to house the intelligentsia, the Jewish intelligentsia that were coming out of the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And these were the people that he was talking to. And that's where he came up with this whole theory. The whole hierarchy of needs came out of the concentration camps. When he talked to these individuals, what did you need? I needed food, I needed water, and sometimes, and people were starving to death, and people were thirsting to death. And of course, that's what we needed. When they were talking about the Warsaw Ghetto uprising and whatnot, they were talking about safety needs. And then, of course, once you get away from there, then you get away from the Nazi terror. Then, of course, you need the belongingness, esteem, cognitive needs. These are all things that they were seeing in New York City, where Maslow actually lived. According to Maslow's theory, our attempt to meet our deficit needs ends with an attempt to satisfy a very different kind of need, the need to grow and develop. And okay, so here I am, I'm talking about World War II, and I'm talking about what Maslow did during World War II. And this is one of the reasons why I think that people need to understand history. You need to understand what was going on. Uh, the problem with the knowledge that we have today is that it's a snapshot of right now. And if we don't understand the past, how can we understand the knowledge that we're acquiring right now? Like just like Swartwood said, said that humanism only lasted for 10 years, and that's ludicrous. And saying the cognitive idea took over in the 1970s, that's also ludicrous because they didn't have any mechanism to prove any of their theories until the 1990s. And if you didn't know that, of course, I lived through all of these things, and I was studying psychology at the time, so I know these things. But if you don't understand history, if you don't look back and see what has happened in the past, you don't really know what's happening today. You don't get a real picture. And of course, people like Swartwood, is that his name? Yeah, Swartwood, can give you any information he wants. He's a cognitive psychologist, so sure, he's going to tell you that the cognitive concept took over in the 1970s, and it didn't. And this isn't anything to argue about. It's just a point of fact. And just because Swartwood made that a fact doesn't mean that it is one. Growth needs are about things like learning, appreciation of the arts, and ultimately self actualization. Eventually, we get to the point of self actualization. But you need to take care of all your other needs first before you can reach self actualization. The need to self actualize is at the top of Maslow's hierarchy and represents the final growth need. Self actualization is the need to reach our fullest potential. Unlike the deficit needs, growth needs such as self actualization do not lessen as we strive to meet the need. As we begin the journey towards self actualization, we typically develop a stronger motivation state. This increases our drive to become the most we can be and furthers the self actualization process. All right. Living up to your potential. That's really what self actualization is all about, living up to your potential. And most of us stop a little bit before that, usually because of one of the other needs, usually because of money. Maslow's theory has been criticized as showing an overly simplistic view of the human condition. Rather than dealing with needs in the step-by-step fashion exemplified by Maslow's hierarchy, people often address needs with multiple levels at the same time. And of course, you have to. If you lose your house, of course, there was a house that just fell into the ocean in North Carolina. They made a big deal about it. Sure, okay, so you've lost your house. Now you have safety needs. You need to fulfill those, as well as, all the other needs. Maslow has also been criticized for his methodology. Maslow chose to develop his theory based on individuals he felt were self-actualized. He did not study individuals at random, leaving open the possibility that his theory is an accurate description of only those individuals studied. And as I told you, he studied Jewish intellectuals coming out of the concentration camps of Europe, of Nazi Germany. Maslow recognized the limitations of his approach, noting that he interpreted his work as merely a starting point for other investigators using more rigorous methodologies. Despite these criticisms, Maslow's theory was critically important in ushering in a renewed interest in internal constructs. He also directed psychological research toward the investigation of mental health instead of disabilities, so prominent in behavioral and Freudian theory. This focus on the typical individual and their journey toward personal fulfillment is currently enjoying a resurgence of interests, and that's positive psychology. Another key concept in humanistic psychology is our need to be self-determined. Self-determination refers to an individual's ability to make choices and take control of their own life. Self-determination theory is a widely accepted framework for understanding human motivation and behavior. According to SDT, there are three basic psychological needs that must be satisfied for individuals to experience optimal well-being: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy refers to the need for control over one's own life and decisions. Competence refers to the need to feel effective in one's actions and pursuits. And relatedness refers to the need for social connection and belongingness. Research has shown that satisfying these basic psychological needs is associated with a range of positive outcomes, such as increased well-being, better academic performance, greater persistence in challenging tasks, and more adaptive coping strategies. When autonomy, relatedness, and competence are thwarted or unmet, individuals may experience negative outcomes such as anxiety, depression, disengagement from activities or relationships, or even physical health problems. One important context where self-determination plays a crucial role is in education. When students feel autonomous in their learning process, that is, they have some say in what they learn or how they learn it, they are more likely to be engaged in their studies and achieve better academic outcomes. Teachers can support students' autonomy by providing choices within assignments or projects, or by allowing them to set their own goals. Another context where self-determination is important as students mature into adulthood is the workplace. Employees who feel competent in their work tasks are more likely to be motivated and productive. Employers can support employees' competence by providing training opportunities or feedback on job performance. Finally, relatedness, the need for social connection, is important for overall well-being at any stage. Social support from friends or family members can help individuals cope with stress and adversity. In addition, feeling connected to a larger community or cause can provide a sense of purpose and meaning in life. Self-determination refers to an individual's ability to make choices and decisions on their own preferences and values and to have control over their own lives. Fostering self-determination is important for personal well-being, motivation, and the development of autonomy. Some research-supported general strategies for promoting self-determination include the following: provide choice and autonomy support. Allowing individuals to have a say in decisions that affect their lives can enhance their sense of self-determination. Set realistic goals. Encourage individuals to set their own goals that align with their interests and values while also ensuring that the goals are realistic and achievable. Support competence development. Help individuals develop and enhance their skills and competencies in areas they find important or interesting. Encourage self-reflection. Promote self-reflection and self-awareness by encouraging individuals to reflect on novel tasks, challenging tasks, or tasks that have aesthetic value, or other tasks leading to intrinsic motivation. Foster a supportive environment. Create an environment that supports self-determination through positive relationships, social support, and meaningful participation. Fostering self-determination is a complex and multifaceted process, and the effectiveness of strategies may vary across individuals and contexts. Therefore, it is important to consider the unique needs and preferences of each person. General approaches to fostering self-determination, applying SDT to a classroom setting, can have significant benefits for student motivation, engagement, and overall well-being. SDT provides a framework for understanding the factors that support or undermine individuals' sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, which are essential for fostering self-determined behavior. Autonomy support. Teachers can provide choice and autonomy support by giving students opportunities to make meaningful decisions about their learning. This can include allowing students to choose topics, projects, or methods of assessment that align to their interests and abilities. Providing autonomy support promotes a sense of ownership and control over their learning, enhancing motivation and engagement. Competence development. Teachers can support students' competence by providing clear expectations, relevant feedback, and opportunities for skill building in the context of optimally challenging tasks. Creating a supportive and challenging learning environment that emphasizes growth and improvement can help students develop their skills and increase their confidence in their abilities. Students who feel competent are more likely to take ownership of their learning and persist in the face of challenges. Relatedness and positive relationships foster a sense of belonging and connection among students by creating a positive classroom climate. Encourage collaboration, cooperation, and respectful interactions among students through a warm, caring, and respectful environment. Building positive relationships between students and teachers can enhance students' motivation, engagement, and overall well-being. When students feel connected and supported, they're more likely to actively participate and take responsibility for their learning. Relevance and intrinsic motivation that helps students see the relevance and meaningfulness of the content that they are learning. Connect the curriculum to students' interests, goals, and real-world applications. When students perceive the value and importance of what they are learning, their intrinsic motivation is more likely to be activated, leading to greater engagement and self-determined behavior. Mindset and goal setting. Encourage students to set challenging but achievable goals that align with their interests and values. Goal setting can provide a sense of direction and purpose, and when coupled with a growth mindset, it can promote students' self-determined motivation and agency. Psychology has made enormous gains in the treatment of mental and behavioral problems. For most of the history of psychology, theorists and practitioners have focused on treating disorders following the traditional medical model. And of course, there's a reason for this. We're trying to bring people back into society. Otherwise, what do we do with them? And of course, that was the whole purpose of focusing on treating disorders. You were trying to bring them back into society. So rather than attacking people for focusing on that, once upon a time they just housed these people. We had all these insane asylums. So you know, forgetting all of that, forgetting all of that and pretending, oh, everybody can be okay, yeah, maybe, but not what. How did we do that? How did we do that? Through therapy and through pharmaceuticals, medications that change the brain chemistry. So now we can focus on positive psychology. We couldn't before. We needed to bring these people back into society. People with schizophrenia, people with bipolar disorder, people with clinical depression, people that were so anxious they couldn't leave their houses. These are people that were people with developmental disabilities. You know, Once upon a time, people with autism. I remember when I first started in psychology, looking at my old uh, abnormal psychology text. It says that 70% of all people suffering from autism, and of course at that time it was autism. It wasn't autism spectrum disorder. People suffering from autism were mute. They couldn't speak. And the reason was because people didn't know how to deal with it. How do you deal with people that have autism? The best way to do it is through behavior modification, forcing them to focus. That's the biggest problem. And of course, before the 1970s, 1960s, these people were just housed. They were sent away, just like what happened in the movie Rain Man. They just sent them away, or they locked them in the attic, or they locked them in the basement. This is what happened to these individuals. And so, of course, now that we have medication, now that we have more sophisticated techniques, now we can focus on positive psychology. But before we needed those things, cognitive psychology couldn't become a driving force in psychology until we could visualize what was going on in people's brains. And of course, that's MRIs and CAT scans and PET scans. And there's a new one out, and I can't remember what it is, but we won't go into that. The focus has been on diagnosis and treatment of disorders, of course. Now that we have done a fairly good job of taking care of all that, now we can focus on positive psychology. And of course, positive psychology takes, and this what didn't happen until 2000. I can remember the APA seminar that where the head of the APA declared that we're no longer going to focus on diagnosis and treatment of disorders. This is in 2000. We're going to focus on positive psychology. That was interesting. And of course, I'd been in psychology for 30 years at that point. Well, 25 years at that point. Positive psych, and I've been saying the same thing. We need to define normal, is what I was saying. We need to define normal so that we can we can understand what abnormal is. The field of positive psychology, okay. Positive psychologists investigate how typically developing individuals can lead better lives. The shift is away from psychological problems and toward nurturing personally relevant success. And I can't pronounce this guy's name. Well, actually, we can go online here. Let me copy it. And I'll show you how horrible or how difficult this name is to pronounce. Pronunciation.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
That's close enough. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Actually, it looks just like it's spelled just like it sounds, isn't it? Csikszentmihalyi has emerged. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi has emerged as one of the lead. He's Hungarian. That's a Hungarian name, by the way. Has emerged as one of the leading theorists in the positive psychology movement. His theory describes how we can achieve maximal personal fulfillment. He's out of California, by the way. He's out of Stanford. So if you're wondering where this guy is, I think he is. I think he's still at Stanford. Wait a second. Let's go back and find him. Let's go back. Okay. Yeah, I think he's still at Stanford. Claremont. Oh, I was wrong. He's at Claremont. Okay. Oh, he died at Claremont. He died in 2021. Yeah, he was at Claremont. One of the things you need to know about Claremont University, very conservative place. I guess you don't need to know about that. It's in Fullerton County in California, very conservative area. His theory describes how we can achieve maximal personal fulfillment. Like the earlier humanistic approaches to motivation, his theory relates our engagement in productive living in internal factors. His theory emphasizes the interactions between two important factors: our perception of task difficulty and the skill we have available to meet task demands. The degree to which these factors interact effectively is called flow, and we're going to talk about flow for the next couple slides. The idea of creating flow is to create that feeling we most notably associate with certain athletic experiences or games, and this is in the zone, being in the zone. At times we feel so completely engrossed in a sport or game that we have a sense of oneness with the activity. There is a match between the challenge presented by the activity and our ability to meet that challenge. There is a level of satisfaction so complete that we feel we are functioning at an optimal level. Csikszentmihalyi has investigated, and what that actually means is son of Mihaly. His name's Mihaly, son of Mihaly. Has investigated this maximal sense of fulfillment and described it as achieving flow. Flow is dependent on the level of challenge presented by the activity. Activities that present too little challenge are unworthy of our investment and lead to apathy or boredom. Flow is also dependent on our perception of our own skills. Engagement in tasks for which we have a high skill level can lead to relaxation or a sense of control. Flow is created when we feel we are engaging in a challenging activity for which we have sufficient skill. Since Csikszentmihalyi original work on flow, there has been enormous growth in our understanding of experience and its scope of influence. What was I going to say? Something important. Nope. Oh, this happened to me when I was in the service. They when I went into the service during Vietnam, and I didn't have a guaranteed job. And so when they gave me my orders, they made me a what they call a security policeman, which is a guy that just stands in front of an airplane and makes sure nobody takes it. Uh, of course, you've got a weapon. Um, it was a job that had the lowest requirement of all the jobs in the Air Force. Now, strangely enough, when I took the ASVAB, and I'm going to brag here just a little bit. When I took the ASVAB test, I aced it. I didn't miss anything. I got everything right. So I, so I had the highest score of anybody that has ever taken the ASVAB test. Not all by myself. There are other people that have done it as well. But so here they give me the job that takes the lowest IQ, and here I've got this amazing score on the ASVAB test. My dad at the time was a colonel in the Army, and of course I joined the Air Force. And he didn't have any power, but he called him up and he said, "This is the dumbest thing in the world. Why in the world would you make him a security policeman when he can do anything? He qualifies for every job in the Air Force. Actually, I didn't. One of the only job I didn't qualify in the Air Force was a fireman because I'm too short. You have to be 5'7", and I'm only 5'6". Anyway, so they got tired of my dad calling him and telling them how dumb they were. So they said, okay, we'll just let him do whatever the hell he wants to do. And I could have been anything. What I wanted to do was be a weatherman, but that job wasn't open. So they showed me all the jobs that had a possibility of doing, and I took the hardest one, and that was being a lab tech. Being a medical lab tech, because you had to learn chemistry, you had to learn hematology and microbiology, and mycology, which is a study of fungus. You have to study everything. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun. So instead of taking the easiest job I could have, I took the hardest job I could have. And the reason I did that was because I was looking for a challenge. And it actually kept me in the service. I was in the service for 12 years, so I reenlisted twice. And I wouldn't have done that if I'd been a security policeman, if I'd taken some goofy job that wasn't challenging. I took a challenging job. Flow at the individual level was found to be positively related to volition, or the will to persist in action. Engagement, which is the tendency to fully immerse yourself in your work. Goal orientation, achievement motive, attraction to your interest in a certain activity, and intrinsic motivation in various settings, such as education. And hopefully the reason that you're studying this, the reason you've taken the educational psychology class, is because either you want to be a teacher or you want to be a psychologist. And you find these things, you find all of this fascinating. And if you don't find it fascinating, then, maybe you're not doing the right thing. Maybe you need to find your passion. Flow theory has obvious implications for education. Uh, Csikszentmihalyi acknowledges the importance of youth finding flow in their work and leisure activities. Flow evolves from an interaction between the individual and the situation. Teachers can help manage environmental variables and encourage personal development so that flow is more likely. In recent years, there has been growing interest in the application of mindfulness practices in educational settings. Mindfulness, defined as the non judgmental awareness of the present moment, has been shown in certain circumstances to have individual benefits, including improved attention, reduced stress, and enhanced well being. Attention is a fundamental cognitive process that plays a crucial role in learning. Research has shown that mindfulness practices can enhance attentional abilities. Mindfulness practices can help students develop the ability to direct attention and resist distractions, leading to improved focus and concentration in the classroom. And these children are meditating, obviously, and that's part of mindfulness, or can be part of mindfulness. Um, Dr. Russ is a big proponent of mindfulness. Me, not so much. Well, for different reasons. Uh, we we evolved in psychology at different times, so we have different ideas of things, and that's okay. Stress is a common experience among students and can negatively impact their learning and performance. Mindfulness based interventions have been found to be effective in reducing stress levels. A meta analysis by Zinner et al. In 2014 examined the effects of mindfulness based interventions on stress reduction in various populations, including students. Their analysis revealed significant reductions in stress levels following mindfulness interventions, indicating its potential as a stress management tool in educational settings. Now, one of the things that you need to understand about, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, but mindfulness doesn't work for everybody. Meditation doesn't work for everybody. Um, you just about have to be a certain type of individual in order for this to work. And I'm just way too laid back to need mindfulness. Mindfulness is pretty much for type A personalities. Really works for them. Works extremely well for them. But of course, I'm not a type A person. I'm a little bit too laid back for that. Emotional regulation is another important aspect of optimal performance in the classroom. Students who are better able to regulate their emotions are more likely to engage in effective learning strategies and exhibit positive social behaviors. Mindfulness practices have been shown to enhance emotional regulation skills. A qualitative study by Simple et al. In 2017, comparing different mindfulness techniques and their impact on the students, found support for increases in emotional regulation for some techniques. Underline some. There is the suggestion that mindfulness can help students develop the ability to recognize and regulate their emotions, leading to improved emotional well-being. But of course, not all students are the same. Self-regulated learning means that students take an active role in their learning process by setting goals, monitoring progress, and using effective learning strategies. Mindfulness practices have been found to support self-regulated learning. Event-related potentials are characteristic patterns of electrical activity in the brain that occur in response to a particular stimulus, such as a self-regulation attempt. Mindfulness training can enhance both volition top-down and automatic bottom-up self-regulatory processes, which involve internal regulation of attention and stimulus-orienting attention, respectively. By combining mindfulness and self-regulation, students can become more flexible in their approach to learning, potentially resulting in enhanced learning. The goals of engaging in mindfulness practice are many, but certainly one goal is improved grades. Several studies have explored the relationship between mindfulness and academic outcomes. For example, a meta-analysis by Osterman et al. In 2022 examined the effects of mindfulness interventions on grade point average, GPA, and found a small but significant positive effect. Small but positive. These findings suggest that incorporating mindfulness practices into the classroom can have a positive impact on students' academic performance. But what they really should be saying is on some students' academic performance. The implementation of mindfulness practices should be conducted in a thoughtful and context-specific manner, taking into consideration the age and development stage of the students, as well as the cultural and and educational context. The following reservations of mindful studies should be noted. Researchers should be cognizant of the potential for mindfulness-based interventions to be used for targeted outcomes. The data support viewing mindfulness-based interventions as a skill set, promoting positive student outcomes, but may not support treatment-specific objectives. Some studies reviewed have small sample sizes, thereby limiting generalizability of findings. And this is the basic problem. Usually the people that are doing the mindfulness, these are individuals that have already accepted it as this is going to work. It doesn't work with the general population. It doesn't always work with the general population. So a lot of the studies that have been done have been, at people that this already works on, have already used this stuff. Studies varied widely in the amount of time engaged in their mindfulness-based interventions, making comparisons challenging. Further research is needed to explore long-term effects of mindfulness interventions on academic performance and to identify the most effective strategies for integrating mindfulness into educational settings. And that's the other problem. Remember when I was talking about public and private schools before? This is mindfulness has been a big deal in private schools, but of course, they're different. These kids are selected, and that's one of the reasons that private schools, if you don't play the game, they kick you out. Public schools can't do that. Public schools have to educate everybody. Private schools can be selective. Whoops, for some reason. Emotions and anxiety potentially play a significant role in optimal performance in classroom learning, as they can either facilitate or hinder students' ability to engage, process information, and perform academically. Emotions have a profound influence on students' cognitive processes, attention, memory, and motivation. Positive emotions such as joy, interest, and curiosity have been found to enhance learning and academic performance. A study by Fredrickson in 2001 demonstrated that positive emotions broaden individuals' attention and cognitive flexibility, leading to improved problem solving and creativity. Similarly, interest and curiosity have been shown to enhance information processing and retention. Negative emotions such as fear, frustration, and boredom can impede learning and academic achievement, and obviously, this is boredom. Anybody looking at their phone is probably pretty bored. Fear and anxiety can have detrimental effects on students' ability to concentrate, process information, and perform well academically. Anxiety can lead to cognitive interference, where excessive worry and rumination occupy working memory, making it difficult for students to focus on the task at hand. This can result in decreased attention, impaired information processing, and reduced academic performance. Anxiety can also hinder students' ability to retrieve information from memory. This can result in underperformance and lower grades. Anxiety can also impact students' motivation and engagement in the classroom. Students with high levels of anxiety may experience a decrease in intrinsic motivation and a shift toward extrinsic motivation driven by fear of failure or avoidance of negative outcomes. This can lead to a decrease in the quality of learning and a focus on performance goals rather than mastery goals. To mitigate the negative impact of anxiety on classroom learning, educators can employ various strategies. One effective approach is to create a supportive and inclusive classroom environment where students feel safe and comfortable expressing their emotions and seeking new information. The strongest voice to challenge behavioral theories came from the cognitive theorists who rose to prominence in the 1970s. No, they didn't. In the 1990s is when they actually rose to prominence and have continued to be powerful forces in psychology. Cognitive theory holds that our thoughts, feelings, plans, and expectations have a direct impact on the expression of our behavior. Cognitive research supports the idea that our thinking can have a direct impact on our motivation to act. Cognitive theorists view people as active and curious. We actively evaluate the world around us and look for meaning in how the world works. Through the process, we develop beliefs and expectations about people and their behavior. This impacts our behavior and ultimately the choices we make in life. An understanding of how students establish such patterns of thinking can help teachers educate more effectively. Attribution theory describes our attempts to determine causes for events happening in our lives and that subsequently impact our levels of motivation. Attribution theory has received considerable attention from educators. This is because educators are particularly interested in how students attribute success or failure during the learning process. Bernard Wiener, uh, which is actually pronounced Weiner if it's a German pronunciation, published several studies on attribution and learning. His theory describes how we make attributions along three dimensions. According to Weiner, that would be the German pronunciation, Weiner's theory, attributing, he's actually from the United States, so he can pronounce it either the German way or the American way. He may pronounce it Weiner. I guess he could if he wanted to. Well, let's see if we can figure out how to pronounce this guy's name. Bernard Weiner. Weiner, probably. Oh, wait a minute. That's a German pronunciation. Let's look this one up. Weiner pronunciation. There it is. Oh,
Wiener.
Wiener. Okay, that's the
Wiener.
That's the English pronunciation.
Wiener.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. If this were German, it would be pronounced Weiner, because the W sounds like a V, and it's the second letter that's long in German. Anyway, okay. So Wiener. Okay, according to Wiener's theory, attributing the cause to an internal factor represents one end of the internal-external dimension. Sometimes we look at the events occurring in our lives and attribute causes to our own abilities. At other times, we attribute causes to external events. Another attributional dimension is based on the perceived stability of the outcome. When we attribute cause to a temporary source, like an unusual amount of effort, we believe the outcome is unstable and unlikely to occur again in the future. This type of attribution falls along the stable unstable dimension. Wiener's third attributional dimension is controllable uncontrollable. This dimension reflects the degree to which we believe an outcome is under someone's control. Expectancy and value theorists believe motivation results from the interaction between our expectancy for success and the value we place on the outcome. Expectancy for success is our perception regarding the potential outcome of a situation. It is our guess about the probability of success. Research has shown that expectancy derives from two factors: task difficulty and self-schemas. Our perceptions about the difficulty of a task clearly affect our expectancy for success. If we believe a task is extremely difficult, we lower our expectations for success accordingly. We have high expectations for success when we feel a task is easy. Another important factor is how we view our capability. For some things, we see ourselves as being highly competent. Self-schema is a term used to refer to the collection of ways that we view ourselves. Depending on our self-schemas, we may be more or less motivated to anticipate success. Our self-schemas and our perception of task difficulty interact to determine our expectations regarding success. Another important perspective to consider is the impact of one's social group on motivation. The need to affiliate may vary from person to person, but all students are affected by their social relationships. Educators are beginning to consider these influences more carefully, trying to better understand the effect of social relationships on the learning process. An interesting theory of how social relations and learning interact focuses on how learning takes place within a social context. Everyone within that context is constantly evolving in terms of their perceptions of themselves as they are learning. Community of learners is simply a collection of individuals gathered for the purpose of meeting a learning objective. This initial phase of the learning process within a community of learners has been termed legitimate peripheral participation, emphasizing that initial participation of new learners is typically along the periphery of the learning community. This is viewed as a necessary and beneficial stage in the overall learning process. It is a time of observation and a way for the beginner to learn the necessary rules governing the interactions of the group. As students learn the material, they will be less distinguishable from the teacher in terms of their vocabulary, skill, and performance. This movement from novice to proficient learner is entirely dependent on the class of learners. In classes where learning is valued, students will be encouraged by social relationships to grow and develop. The quality of their learning will be a product of their unique community. If students place themselves in a social group that devalues academic success, the quality of the learning product will be compromised. This makes it important for teachers to encourage students to identify with a community of learners that values excellence and mastery. Another sociological factor to consider in education is the diversity in the classroom. Diversity is a complex and multifaceted issue that has significant implications for student motivation. Students come from a wide range of backgrounds, cultures, and experiences, and these differences can impact their motivation to learn. Different students are motivated by different things, and these motivations can be influenced by a range of factors, including cultural background, socioeconomic status, and prior experiences. One of the key challenges of diversity in the classroom is that students may have different motivations for learning. Students from collectivist cultures, Eastern cultures, may be more motivated by group work and collaboration, while students from individualistic cultures, Western cultures, may be more motivated by competition and individual achievement. Research has shown that the cultural diversity can impact student motivation in several ways. Dweck and Leggett in 1988 found that students from different cultural backgrounds had different beliefs about the nature of intelligence. Students from individualistic cultures tended to believe that intelligence was fixed and innate, while students from collectivistic cultures tended to believe that intelligence was malleable and could be developed through effort. These beliefs had a significant impact on student motivation, with students who believed in the malleability of intelligence being more motivated to learn and persist in the face of challenges. Another way that cultural diversity can impact student motivation is by culturally responsive teaching practices. Culturally responsive teaching involves adapting teaching methods and materials to meet the needs of students from diverse cultural backgrounds. This can include incorporating culturally relevant examples and materials into lessons, using teaching strategies that are familiar to students from different cultures, and creating a classroom environment that is inclusive and respectful of all students. Socioeconomic diversity is another form of diversity that can impact student motivation. Students from low-income backgrounds may face a range of challenges that can impact their motivation to learn, including limited access to resources, lack of support at home, and exposure to stress and trauma. These challenges can make it difficult for students to engage in learning activities, persist in the face of challenges. Siren in 2005 found that students from low-income backgrounds had low levels of academic motivation than students from higher income backgrounds. Rumberger and Pollardi in 2005 found that students from low-income backgrounds were less likely to be engaged in school and more likely to drop out than students from higher income backgrounds. One way to address the impact of socioeconomic diversity on student motivation is by targeted interventions. Programs that provide additional resources and support to students from low-income backgrounds, such as tutoring, mentoring, and after-school programs, can help to improve student motivation and engagement. Programs that address the social and emotional needs of students, such as counseling and mental health services, can help to reduce impact of stress and trauma on student motivation. Students may differ in their learning styles, personality traits, and prior experiences with learning. These individual differences can affect how students approach learning tasks and how much effort they put into them. Research by Shunk and Pajares in 2002 found that students who had a growth mindset, believing that their ability could be developed through effort, had higher levels of motivation and achievement than students with a fixed mindset, who believed that their abilities were fixed and unchangeable. Biggs in 1987 found that students who had a deep approach to learning, characterized by a desire to understand and make connections, had higher levels of motivation and better academic outcomes than students with a surface approach, who focused on memorization and regurgitation of information. Regurgitation means vomit, by the way. Addressing individual differences in the classroom can be challenging, but there are strategies that teachers can use to promote motivation for all students. Providing choice and autonomy in learning tasks can help to engage students and tap into their individual interests and preferences. Differentiating instruction to meet the diverse needs of students can also help to promote motivation because it allows students to work at their own pace and level of challenge. Providing feedback and recognition that is tailored to individual student strengths and areas for growth can help to foster motivation and a sense of competence. The various perspectives on motivation help teachers understand that what makes for a successful and personally fulfilling academic experience. The different emphasis of each perspective can be confusing at times. but they help teachers develop insight into what motivates students' behavior, thinking, and interpersonal interactions. When students work toward a certain outcome or goal, they are engaging in goal-directed behavior. Goal-directed behavior involves striving to accomplish a desired outcome. When it comes to achievement in the classroom, two types of goals have been extensively studied: performance goals and mastery goals. When trying to achieve a goal, students often take a mastery or performance approach. Mastery-oriented students focus on learning the material. Performance-oriented students are more concerned about how they will be judged. Students who set mastery and performance goals have different concepts of success. Students with performance goals are focusing on social comparisons. A student may make a comparison to normative standards or to the performance of others that they know. In contrast, mastery goals are based on the intrinsic value of learning and the belief that one's efforts will lead to new knowledge or skill. In the case of mastery goals, standards are self-referenced rather than looking to some outside norm to define their success. Mastery-oriented learners are motivated to engage in the process of learning as they work to understand and master content, even if failures occur along the way. Not all students have a desire to achieve. The goal for some students is to do as little work as possible. A student with a work-avoidant goal orientation gets work done with as little exertion or effort as possible. Work-avoidant learners do not want to learn or look smart. They simply want to avoid work. It appears that work-avoidant goals may also combine with other types of goals to influence cognitive engagement and academic achievement. And I looked at this picture, and one of the interesting things about it is this is a map of Germany, and this says Bundesrepublik. Republik, that's a German way of spelling German Republic. So this kid is actually German. This is a picture from Germany. I guess they're all bored. Work avoidant. A student with a performance goal orientation may also show work avoidant goals, striving to beat his classmates with as little effort as possible. These traits ultimately undermine student learning and lead to academic difficulties. Identifying what aspect of a student's behavior supports work avoidance is difficult. Some teachers have students keep daily journals to help identify which behaviors negatively impact academic success. It is also important for teachers to help students develop an appreciation for the positive outcome associated with active engagement in the learning process. When considering social goals, it is important for teachers to remember that we have an inherent need to affiliate with others. Social relationships can be a great source of support for a student. A student's pursuit of social goals may positively influence the pursuit of academic goals by promoting positive classroom behaviors and enhancing teacher and peer relations. At times, students may gravitate toward each other because of their mutual success in school. Their social relationships formed around a perception of themselves as being good at school. In this situation, students may expend considerable effort to maintain their academic success, so they may maintain their social bonds. Social relations can work in the opposite direction. Some friendships form because students see themselves as struggling in school. This can exert a negative influence on learning as students prioritize other activities. Students may be distracted from learning tasks to attend to conflicting social concerns. Even if students see themselves as academically capable, they may still develop social relationships that pull them away from the activities supporting academic success. Research shows that when a student's peer group does not value or actively discourages academic achievement, negative effects on school performance result. Research indicates that students may have multiple social and academic goals that interact in complicated ways to affect engagement in learning and academic achievement. Educational success requires students to negotiate a difficult balance between powerful socialization needs and the demanding work required for academic success. If teachers find that hanging out with friends is competing with school, they should explore ways to help the students meet their social needs in academically productive ways. A conversation with a student might help to identify preferred peer relationships. The teacher can then pair these friends for group activities in school. The teacher can also give outside class assignments to help bring academic focus to activities outside of school. This approach uses desirable social relationships to encourage spending time on beneficial academic tasks. Students are already socializing after school, and this approach simply builds upon existing relationships to help a student produce academically. Working with a student's existing social goals helps the student learn to participate in social activities in ways that do not detract from but support their academic progress. Research on goal setting indicates that goals serve four primary functions. Directs behavior toward goal-relevant behaviors. Goals help us engage in behaviors that support our goals and away from behaviors that are irrelevant to achieving our goals. Provides an energizing effect that helps people move toward their goals. Goals lead to more energetic effort to succeed. Helps with persistence. Goals lead to long-lasting efforts to achieve a desired outcome. Encourages effective use of new or existing knowledge and strategies. Goals promote the development of new and inventive solutions to any barriers to goal achievement. Setting goals leads to a variety of positive outcomes. Research has shown that goals are more effective if they are specific and challenging and are realized in the near future. When we set goals that are too vague and ill-defined, it makes it difficult for us to recognize when we are failing to make satisfactory progress. Goals such as, "I want better grades," are typically too vague to be helpful. Goals that are perceived as too easy are unlikely to motivate us to adequately pursue the goal. Goals should be challenging enough to engage us in the task, but not too difficult. We are more likely to try to achieve something if the results of that activity are realized in the near future. Goals surrounding events too far in the future are typically overlooked in favor of goals with immediate results. Goals provide much needed guidance and structure and can have lasting positive effects in adulthood. Into adulthood. Teachers can provide enormous support by educating students on appropriate goal-setting strategies. They are also in a good position to encourage students to consider the benefits of academic achievement in realizing life goals. Teachers can make goal setting a part of their curricular plan. Teachers and students should share in the development of overall classroom goals. Teachers can also work with students individually to develop appropriate personal goals. This provides students and teachers with focus and direction, both of which enhance motivation. Co-development of goals also helps students fully engage in meeting goals. And that is the end of the chapter. So I'll talk to you next week.